The box shimmered in the August sun, velvet, red, with a ribbon that looked like it had been tied by trembling hands. Aria Danforth, the newly 18 heiress of a billion-dollar media empire, stood poised to open it, surrounded by champagne flutes, camera flashes, and half-whispers from a room that expected her to smile. But across the marble ballroom, a boy in a delivery jacket was running. Not walking, not calling for someone else. Running. He dodged past guards, knocked over a tray, skidded across polished tile. "Don't open that box." Gasps erupted. Aria's fingers froze on the ribbon. The boy, Miles, had never been noticed before. Not really. Just a delivery kid in a helmet. But today, he knew something they didn't. Something dangerous. Because that box wasn't a gift. And if it opened, it wouldn't just ruin a party, it would destroy her life. Keep watching, because the truth behind that gift will rewrite her entire life. Miles kept his head down. Helmet on, hoodie up, backpack zipped tight. He blended into the city like a background shadow, just another delivery kid weaving through traffic on a dented electric bike, earbuds in silence out. But beneath the anonymity was a mind wired for brilliance. He used to be a name, at least in the online circles that mattered. A coding prodigy. The kind of kid who got tapped for scholarships before his voice had even settled. By age 13, Miles had written encryption tools so elegant they were studied in college courses. At 14, he was accepted into Rydell Tech Academy, a place where the best minds gathered under one roof to invent the future. Then everything collapsed. His older brother Theo had been arrested for cybercrime, not just small stuff. A breach traced to stolen corporate IP and cryptocurrency theft. But the evidence had holes, fabricated timestamps, a missing laptop that conveniently reappeared at the scene. Miles knew it wasn't real, but he also knew public opinion didn't care. The media pounced, and just like that, the scholarship was pulled. Their family name became poison. To protect what little dignity remained, Miles vanished. He scrubbed his online presence, withdrew from school, and refused to speak about tech again. Theo went underground. Their parents moved out of the city. Miles stayed behind. That was 3 years ago. Now he lived in a tiny studio above a laundromat and delivered packages across districts. A rote system, a predictable loop. No attachments, no questions. No one looked at him twice, except sometimes. She did. Aria Danforth, the girl in the estate, the girl who left little signs that she noticed. The Danforth mansion was part of his Thursday-Saturday route, tucked behind 10-foot hedges and wrought iron gates. Most weeks, Miles dropped parcels at the security booth. Drones scanned him. Guards ignored him. But once in a while, she was by the window. And once, just once, she'd walked to the front foyer and waved, on the marble steps in ballet flats and a pale blue cardigan. She didn't say anything. She just waved. He waved back. After that, she started leaving him small things. A bottle of cold tea taped to a box, a protein bar with a sticky note that said, "Long day," and once folded in half and tucked beneath a parcel label, a note in slanted handwriting. "Thanks for making this place feel less artificial." It was the strangest compliment he'd ever received. He never replied. Couldn't, wouldn't, because he knew who Aria was. Aria Danforth, heir to the Danforth Communications empire. A media giant. Her parents died in a helicopter crash when she was 10, and custody was transferred to her uncle, Conrad Danforth. He was clean-cut, PR polished, and frighteningly strategic. Within a year of taking over the company, pivoted from news to surveillance tech, drone development, and cloud-based behavioral prediction systems. Miles knew because he'd studied them in school, but now he saw them in real time on shipping labels. For the last few months, strange packages had been arriving at the estate. Unlisted serials, hardware that didn't match catalog entries. One drone box was labeled Aquatic Research, but he recognized the shell it was used for stealth audio surveillance. Each time he scanned the codes out of habit. Each time his gut twisted harder. He couldn't prove anything. He was just a delivery kid. And yet the pieces didn't fit. Until one Tuesday morning, when the root system glitched, he was called in for a special delivery last minute. A single box, large, velvet wrapped, no listed sender. Destination Danforth Estate, Aria's birthday. He stood by the gate watching staff move chairs and crystal dishes onto the front lawn. Floral arrangements the size of small cars, a red carpet, a string quartet, and standing on the steps blinking in the sunlight, Arya, 18, alone. Miles stepped forward. "Delivery," he muttered. A guard took the box. Miles reached out quickly. "Wait," he said. "Can I just confirm the drop ID?" The guard rolled his eyes. "You just dropped it." "We'll sign." "It's policy," Miles said flatly. "New scanner protocol." He lifted the lid on his handheld. The code popped up. He blinked, then scanned it again. It wasn't just spoofed. It had been routed through 6 different countries, encrypted in a format he hadn't seen since Theo's case. And the signature hash, it matched a black market key he'd studied as a teen. Something used to disguise destructive code modules. His fingers went cold. He looked up too late. The box was being carried inside. Arya, unaware, reached for it with trembling hands. From the stairs, Conrad Danforth watched her smiling like he'd planned this moment for years. Miles stepped back. Every instinct screamed at him to walk away. He wouldn't be blamed. No one would listen to him anyway. It wasn't his world. But then he remembered something. A note. "Thanks for making this place feel less artificial." And somehow that was enough. He turned, shoved past the guards, ducked under velvet rope, sprinted toward the open doors where chandeliers sparkled and music played. Guests turned in confusion. Waiters paused, and as Arya lifted the first corner of the red ribbon, Miles burst into the ballroom breathless. "Don't open that box." The words rang through the ballroom like a gunshot. Every head turned. Crystal clinked to the floor. A gasp rippled outward from the birthday cake table to the double doors where Miles stood, helmet dangling from his arm chest, heaving. Arya's eyes widened. She froze, her hands still on the ribbon. The guards reacted first. "Get him one," barked. Miles sidestepped as 2 men lunged. He grabbed the closest tablecloth, yanked it down to trip them, and sprinted toward Arya. Flower petals and silverware scattered. Guests shrieked. Music stuttered to a halt. He reached her just as her uncle Conrad stepped forward. Conrad's calm broke for a split second, eyes narrowing in a flash of recognition. But Miles barely noticed. His eyes were locked on the box. "Don't touch it," he said to Arya, voice low, ragged. She looked back, caught between horror and confusion. "What? What is this? Who are you?" He hesitated. For a single heartbeat, he wanted to lie. Then he looked at her, really looked, and saw a girl not made of porcelain, but of questions and quiet courage. "I'm someone who knows you're in danger," he said, almost whispering. She stepped back. Conrad's face shifted smoothly into concern. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded, voice silky, projecting authority. Miles ignored him. He pulled his old phone from his pocket, flipped it open, and showed the tracking code history. The display flickered with numbers and signatures that meant nothing to most, but to the right eyes told a story. "See this," he said, holding it so Arya could see. His finger traced the code. This box was rerouted through Moscow, Sao Paulo, Bangkok, and 3 offshore data centers. Then it was re-encrypted with a signature used by black market brokers. "This isn't from your parents." Conrad stepped forward. "This is insane security. Get him out." "Stop!" Arya shouted, her voice cracking the stunned silence. Everyone froze. Her eyes locked on Miles. "Explain," she demanded, her voice trembling but firm. Miles took a breath. The ballroom felt cavernous, like every word might echo forever. He spoke quickly but clearly. "Over the past few months, I've seen shipments to this estate. Tech that doesn't match any Danforth corporate orders. Devices used for hacking, surveillance, blackmail. This box, this is the culmination. It's a trap. Open it, and everything private, every skeleton in the Danforth closet becomes public. It's not a bomb. It's worse, a data weapon." Someone in the crowd whispered, "He's crazy." Another murmured, "Who is he?" Conrad stepped closer to Arya, putting an arm around her shoulders. "Sweetheart, he's lying. He's probably blackmailing us himself." But Miles had seen enough manipulation to know the signs. He pointed a shaking finger at Conrad. "You planned this, didn't you? You're the only one who'd benefit. Destroy her reputation, take full control of the company, and bury the evidence." Arya stiffened at Conrad's side. For a moment, no one moved. The chandeliers swayed gently overhead. Then Arya stepped out from under Conrad's arm. "Uncle," she said softly, her voice full of something new. "Where did this box come from?" Conrad's expression hardened. "Don't be ridiculous. But she interrupted him. "No. Where did it come from?" His eyes flicked to Miles, then back to her. That flicker was all she needed. She backed away, eyes filling with tears. "You lied to me." The guards hesitated, uncertain who to obey. Arya knelt beside the box. Carefully, she slid the ribbon off without opening the lid. She tilted the box enough to reveal a small display panel blinking with a countdown. Miles dropped to his knees beside her, flipping the box over. His hands moved with a speed he hadn't used since the academy. Wires, circuits, a microcontroller. He pulled a pocket knife from his boot and sliced a power lead. The countdown froze. A hush fell over the room. He exhaled shakily. Then, without ceremony, he tore the velvet covering away to reveal the device, a slim black console, bristling with data ports and a single blinking indicator labeled Trigger. A stunned murmur rolled through the guests. Arya looked up at Miles, her face pale. You saved me." She turned to Conrad, but he was gone. The doors at the back of the ballroom swung as Conrad fled, shoving aside stunned guests. Miles vaulted over the box, sprinting after him. Through the hallway, down marble stairs, across a glass walkway over the indoor koi pond. Conrad was surprisingly fast. His loafers slapped the tile as he burst onto the lawn. Miles tackled him near the rose bushes, the two of them crashing to the grass. "Get off me!" Conrad snarled, trying to elbow Miles in the ribs. But Miles pinned him, eyes wild. Why do this to her?" Conrad stopped struggling for a moment. His voice dropped to a hoarse whisper. "She's weak. She's naive. She'd ruin everything her father built. I was going to save this family." By destroying her, Miles spat, shaking with fury. A security guard arrived, pulling them apart. More staff swarmed in. Soon Conrad was on his knees in handcuffs, his expensive suit streaked with dirt. Arya appeared at the mansion doors, guards flanking her. She walked across the lawn, slowly, deliberately. When she reached them, she looked down at her uncle. Tears ran down her cheeks. "You taught me to trust no one," she said softly. "But I still wanted to believe in you." He looked away. She turned to Miles, voice shaking. "And you? Why did you come back?" Miles swallowed hard. "Because you're the only person who ever saw me." A gust of wind stirred the birthday banners overhead. Arya looked into his eyes. In that moment, something shifted. The guests were gone. The lawn was quiet now, except for the rustle of wind through the hedges and the distant buzz of drones dismantling the birthday setup. Inside the estate, Arya sat at the edge of the grand staircase, her party dress wrinkled, barefoot hair fallen out of its once perfect twist. Miles stood several feet away, fidgeting with the strap of his backpack, unsure if he should stay. She had asked him to, but part of him didn't trust the quiet. Not after all this. Arya looked up slowly. Was any of it real? Her voice cracked on the last word. Miles didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked around the foyer. The marble floors, the portraits of Danforth ancestors, the air that still smelled faintly of champagne and roses. He finally sat down on the floor back against the wall across from her like a confessor. The code. The shipments. Yeah, all of it was real. He paused. "I've seen patterns like that before. I studied them. Before I stopped." She tilted her head. "Why'd you stop?" He hesitated. "My brother was accused of something he didn't do. Cybercrime. They blamed him for a breach he couldn't have pulled off alone, but the timing lined up too perfectly. There was evidence someone framed him, framed us. I would have figured it out if I'd kept going. But—" He trailed off. She waited, but I froze, he admitted. "They pulled my scholarship. My family fell apart. I thought, if I just vanished, maybe I could protect what was left of us." A long silence settled between them. Then Arya whispered, "And now," he looked at her. "Now I'm tired of hiding." Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them like an old connection that hadn't yet been named. "I believed the letter," Arya said suddenly. "The one on the box. It said, 'From your parents.' I know it sounds stupid, but—" She exhaled shakily. "For a second, I wanted to believe they'd left me something. Anything." Miles didn't laugh. He didn't judge her. He just nodded. "That's not stupid," he said quietly. She pulled her knees to her chest. "I was always told I'd inherit the company, but it never felt real. Everything was controlled by my uncle meetings, people I was allowed to talk to, what I posted online. It was like he kept me frozen in time. Like if I stayed the obedient little girl, he could stay in power." "You're not frozen anymore," Miles said gently. "No," she agreed, voice firm. "I'm not." They sat there for a while, two people from opposite worlds, quietly rebuilding something unnamed. Then footsteps echoed from the hallway. A woman in a sharp black suit approached, her heels tapping with authority. Behind her, 3 Danforth board members trailed in silence. The woman introduced herself as Elise Vargas, head of internal ethics for Danforth Communications. "Miss Danforth," she began, "we've reviewed the footage and the recovered device. The implications are serious." Aria stood. She smoothed her dress chin raised. "I'll address the board myself," she said. Miles blinked. "You will." She nodded. "This is my company, my name, my family's legacy. It's time I stopped being the face and started being the voice." Vargas gave a slight smile. "In that case, you may want to bring him." She gestured to Miles. He frowned. "Why me?" "Because Vargas said you're the only reason this wasn't a public catastrophe, and the board will want to hear how you knew what no one else did." Aria turned to him. "Will you come with me?" He hesitated. Then he nodded. The boardroom felt like another universe. All glass walls and soft leather chairs. A panoramic view of the city skyline. Clean, cold light. Miles stood at one end of the table, Aria at the other. The board members looked skeptical until he started speaking. At first his voice wavered, but as he pulled up screenshots, mapped network paths, and explained the digital fingerprint trail, the room shifted. Postures straightened. Phones were put down. By the time he reached the final slide, the one showing Conrad's pattern of data misdirection, the silence was complete. "Your former CEO planned to stage a leak," Miles said calmly. He wanted to destabilize Aria's claim, discredit the Danforth name, and restructure ownership through emergency control protocols. One board member cleared his throat. "And how exactly do you know all this?" "I used to be a prodigy," Miles said. "Then I disappeared. But I didn't stop learning." He looked at Aria. "She made me visible again." Another member asked Miss Danforth, "What would you do with this information?" Aria's hands were steady on the table. "I'd start by cleaning house. We rebuild with transparency, or we don't rebuild at all. And I want him," she pointed to Miles as my official internal cybersecurity advisor. The room went still. Then Elise Vargas leaned forward. "You'll need approval from oversight." "I know," Aria replied. "But I'm done asking for permission to do what's right." There was a long pause. Then slowly, board member by board member, heads nodded. That night, the estate was quiet again. Aria stood on the back patio, watching the city lights blink below like Morse code. Miles joined her hands in his pockets. She didn't turn right away. "You really were a prodigy," she murmured. "I still am," he said softly. She smiled faintly. "You saved my life." He shook his head. "You saved your own. I just reminded you how." Silence fell. And then Aria said the words neither of them had dared to say before. "I don't want to be alone in this anymore." Miles looked at her. Really looked. "Then don't be." She reached for his hand. He didn't pull away. The next few weeks moved like a shifting tide. Fast, then slow, then fast again. Media outlets exploded with the story. Danforth scandal shocks. Boardroom. Heiress stops. Leak with help from anonymous hero. Birthday party gone. Viral, who is the boy in the helmet? But the headlines barely scratched the truth. Behind closed doors, Aria was fighting to hold the company together. With Conrad in custody, an internal trust, fractured every day, brought a new leak, a new resignation, a new test of loyalty. And Miles, he became something he never imagined visible. He was given a badge, a title, an office well more like a converted closet, but it had a window and that was enough. The staff started calling him the Firewall, not always kindly. Some whispered about him in elevators. "Street rat," one executive muttered as he passed. Another scoffed. Didn't know we were hiring vigilantes now. He heard it all. But he didn't care, because Arya trusted him, and she was the only one who ever had. Still, some days were harder than others, like the morning they found a second device hidden in a sculpture in the conference wing. Miles disarmed it, but the message was clear: someone else had been working with Conrad. The rot went deeper than either of them expected. Arya called an emergency meeting with the remaining board. She stood at the head of the table again, less polished this time, but more powerful because of it. Miles stood beside her, quiet but steady. "We don't just have a security problem," she said. "We have a culture problem. We let loyalty be bought. We stopped asking hard questions. That ends now." Elise Vargas nodded in agreement, but several older members remained skeptical. "What are you proposing?" one asked. Arya took a breath. "Transparency. Every past contract, every off-book vendor, every surveillance archive reviewed and verified. And Miles will oversee the process." There were murmurs. One man in a pinstripe suit leaned forward. "He's just a kid." Arya's tone cooled. "And you were just a signature away from signing over the company to a saboteur. So maybe we try trusting the kid." No one argued after that. Later that week, Arya and Miles sat together in the archives room, reviewing old server logs. "I used to think I wasn't strong enough," she said, fingers trailing across a dusty ledger. "That maybe Uncle Conrad was right, that I was too soft, too emotional, too young." Miles didn't look up from the monitor. "You're none of those things." She smiled faintly. "You know, he told me once that my father never meant for me to lead." "Do you believe that?" "I did. For a long time." She paused. "But now, I think my father would have wanted someone who could tell the truth even when it hurt." Miles finally looked at her. "Then you're exactly who the company needs." She blushed just slightly. And before either could say more, the door opened. A man stood there, early 30s, scruffy with familiar eyes. Miles stood abruptly. "Theo," his brother stepped in slowly. "Didn't think I'd see you in a suit." Miles laughed. "I didn't think I'd own one." Theo's eyes were cautious but proud. "I saw what you did. The news left out the good parts, though." Miles motioned him in. "Come on. Arya, this is Theo." Arya extended a hand warmly. "I've heard so much, and I'm glad you're here." Theo looked between them, amused. "So, this is the girl who changed your route." Miles groaned. "Don't start." But Arya only laughed. The real test came a month later, a final vote. The board was restructured, and several new stakeholders arrived from the legal department to oversee the transition period. Some wanted Arya out entirely, claiming she wasn't ready, but she surprised everyone. Her speech that day wasn't long. It wasn't loud. It was honest. "I was raised behind gates and glass," she said. "Taught to smile for the camera and keep my questions to myself. But when the person I trusted most tried to erase me, the only person who stepped in wasn't in a suit. He didn't come with credentials. He came with the truth. And he risked everything just to be heard." She looked directly at the board. "That's the kind of loyalty I want leading this company." By the time she finished, no one had a word of protest. The vote passed. She was named the acting CEO with full support. And Miles, he became her chief of internal systems. Not a formal role at first, but people started listening when he talked. And that was new. That night, after the final vote, the two of them stood again on the rooftop of the estate. The city glittered below. "You know," she said softly, "I keep thinking about the first time I saw you." He grinned, dropping off toner cartridges. "No," she said. "Before that, you were at the gate, just standing there, helmet on. I remember thinking he looks like he knows something no one else does." Miles smiled, then looked away. "I almost walked away that day. The day of the party. But you didn't." He turned back to her. "Because someone once told me I made this place feel less artificial." She laughed. "I remember." They stood in silence for a moment. Then Arya reached into her coat and pulled out a small ribbon. "Red, velvet, the same one from the box. I kept it," she said. "I thought I'd be afraid of it. But it reminds me not everything wrapped in silk is a gift." She handed it to him. He took it gently. "I still don't know how this ends," he said. She stepped closer. "Maybe we write it together." 2 years later, the city felt different. Still loud, still full of lights and blaring horns and endless ambition. But to Miles, it finally felt like a place he could belong to. The security firm he and Arya built had grown faster than either of them expected. It started with a small internal task force, 4 coders, 2 analysts, and Theo, who had quietly joined full-time after his name was formally cleared in a private Danforth-led inquiry. They worked out of a small downtown office above a print shop with peeling paint and a coffee machine that hissed more than it brewed. Now they had a corner of the Danforth Tower. Frosted glass, polished floors, a sign on the wall, Danforth Digital Ethics and Risk. A name Arya insisted on, even though Miles wanted something less official sounding. She told him it had to be that. Because what they did wasn't just about plugging security holes. It was about rebuilding trust in a world that monetized secrets. The irony wasn't lost on either of them. One afternoon, Miles stood at the window watching the rain streak the skyline. His desk was cluttered with data sheets, but he wasn't looking at them. He was thinking about the letter he'd just received. A formal invitation from Rydell Tech Academy, a chance to speak at their annual innovation conference. It had come with a note. "You may have left Mr. Ross, but your name never did." He didn't know if he'd accept. Part of him felt like he'd outgrown that boy, the one who lost everything and vanished behind delivery routes and fake names. And yet, he turned as Arya stepped into his office holding 2 mugs. She handed him one. "Chamomile," she said. "You look like you haven't blinked in an hour." "Probably haven't," he muttered, accepting the mug with a tired smile. She tilted her head. "Something on your mind?" He handed her the letter. She read it quickly, then looked up. "Are you going?" "I don't know," he admitted. "Feels like a different lifetime." She sat on the edge of his desk. "Maybe it is, but maybe that's the point." They sat in silence for a moment. Then she said, "You know, I used to think legacy was something you inherited. A burden. A crown made of glass." He glanced at her. "But I think it's something else," she continued. "Something you build, with the people who stay when the box opens and the world cracks apart." He laughed softly. "That's poetic." "I've had practice," she said, sipping her tea. That evening they attended a press gala. Not their usual scene, but Arya was receiving an award for corporate transparency initiatives. Miles stood off to the side as she spoke on stage, elegant, confident, absolutely herself. He noticed how many people were watching her. How many respected her now, not just for her name, but for her actions. She spoke of accountability, of being brave enough to change course, of listening to the unheard voices, the ones who knock on the side door helmet in hand, carrying something no one else sees. When she stepped down, she found Miles waiting at the bottom of the stairs. She didn't speak. She just reached for his hand again. And again, he didn't pull away. Later that week, he returned to the estate. Not for work, just to visit. He stood in the ballroom now, quiet, repurposed into a space for employee art showcases and small community events. He walked over to the place where the box had been that day, and he knelt. There embedded under glass was the ribbon, framed, preserved. A small plaque beneath it read, "Truth may not come wrapped in silk, but it still saves." He smiled, not because it was poetic, but because it was real. On the anniversary of that day, Arya and Miles walked through the downtown plaza hand in hand. There was a subtle shift in the way people looked at them now, not with confusion, but with curiosity. Not just an heiress and a former delivery boy, but 2 people who had refused to stay invisible, who had rebuilt something from the ruins of trust. At one point, a small boy ran past and accidentally bumped into Miles. The boy turned eyes wide. "Sorry, mister." Miles knelt. "It's okay," he said. "Are you lost?" The boy nodded, tears starting to well. Arya crouched beside them. "Let's find your parents, all right." Miles took the boy's hand, and together they walked forward. It's strange, isn't it? How something as small as a ribbon can become the turning point in 2 lives. Miles hid from the world to protect what he loved. Arya was caged by a world trying to control her name, but when they met, truly met, they helped each other see beyond what they were taught to be. Sometimes the people who seem invisible are the ones who carry the light. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever felt like your voice didn't matter until someone finally listened? Or maybe you were the one who saw someone others overlooked. Share your story in the comments I'll be reading. And if this story meant something to you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more. Thanks for staying till the end. See you in the next one.